If Super Metroid is the mother of the Metroidvania genre, then Castlevania Symphony of the Night would undoubtedly be its father. And there's a reason why these two amazing video games gave birth to a complete genre. And it's because of the gameplay style, the graphical art style, as well as the music that you get from both of these games. Now, with Super Metroid, a lot of people grew up playing this on one of the most popular consoles of all time in the Super Nintendo. And a lot of people love Metroid because of the upgradability, all of the different weapons and tools that you're able to unlock throughout the game, as well as the ability to explore new aspects and new parts of each level. It's almost like you're actually on an adventure. And as you progress through each stage and get to each new area, each come with their own distinct music and graphical art style. And it's all done in this very timeless 16/32-bit pixelated art style that I think has aged miraculously. It's aged very well over the years. And the same could be said for Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Whereas the difference with Castlevania is that it's more of like an RPG style type of game. You still have the ability to unlock new areas and levels, and the character himself is able to upgrade and unlock different attacks and different abilities. But throughout the game, there's this beautiful sense of music and sound effects that really just help to create the atmosphere. And I think these two games, it's not a mystery that they gave birth to one of the most amazing genres of all time. All that being said, here in 2025, we're still getting games that mimic what we saw from these two games that we got back in the 90s. And Castlevania in particular, we've seen a lot of games mimic the Castlevania formula throughout the years. And what I want to showcase in this video is 5 Switch games that I have in my collection that are nearly direct predecessors of what we got from the Castlevania Symphony of the Night series. Now, most of these I have played. I think a couple of them I have not played yet, but they all share a lot of the same feel, a lot of the same level design, and a lot of the same progression that you see from Castlevania. But at the end of the day, let's face it, none will ever beat the originator. So without any further ado, let's take a look at some of these games. Starting off, we have The Last Faith. Now, The Last Faith was a game that was released not that long ago. I think The Last Faith came out last year, and it follows more of a Souls-like art style. It's very dark, it's very grim. The Last Faith is not very dynamic from what I've seen. Now, I never really got too far into the game, but from the very start, I don't really feel like it immersed me enough into it with the story or with kind of like the cutscenes, because a lot of these games, and I think a lot of what these companies really should be doing with the Switch is they really should be leveraging the technology to create better cutscenes. I think better cutscenes in these games would help immerse the player more into the story. But The Last Faith is decent. It's a decent Metroidvania, decent platforming, decent weapons, but the characters start to feel, or the enemies rather, start to feel a little bit repetitive. And it kind of feels like something that you'll tend to see a lot on the Switch. Nevertheless, when it comes to this genre that we're looking at here in particular, The Last Faith is a game that you may want to look into and give it a try. But as you'll see, in my opinion, this is kind of like a carbon copy of a better version of a game that we got on the Switch, which we'll talk about as we go through. The next game is a game that I'd seen before and was recommended to me by a subscriber to the channel, and this is Beyond the Ice Palace 2. Now, Beyond the Ice Palace 2, in my opinion, kind of takes a little bit what we see from The Last Faith and does it a little bit better. I think they do a little bit of a better job with the sprite work in Beyond the Ice Palace 2. I think the sound effects are a little exaggerated, but they're kind of satisfying. You get a light and a heavy attack, and in the beginning, it's pretty much the same with most of these games. You kind of have to progress through the game to unlock more abilities, to unlock new weapons and different things like that, and to upgrade the character's vitality, their strength, their stamina, their endurance, all the different attributes. Usually there's like a skill tree in a lot of these games. where you, as you progress through the game, you kind of increase the skills in different categories to make the character strong enough to progress throughout the game. And I think Beyond the Ice Palace is a decent game. I think the sprite work in this one is pretty good, but again, it comes off kind of like a little bit of a bland feeling. I have to play it a little bit more. I have played it. Not super impressed with what I've gotten straight out of the gate, but what you'll see is with this genre, a lot of games tend to be somewhat repetitive, and this, like The Last Faith, follows more of like that darker Souls-like type of theme throughout the game. The next one is Galardians, and this one is a little bit of a contrast to the first two games that we've seen. Now, I have not yet played this version of Galardians. This is actually the second version of Galardians. The first version of Galardians was Galardians Demon Purge, and I did play that version of Galardians on the PlayStation 4. I had it for the Switch, but I played it primarily on the PlayStation 4. And this one is a little bit of a different scenario where you get to play as one of two characters and you can switch them throughout the game. One is more of a melee hack and slash style character. The other one is more of like a projectile shoot 'em up style character. And you kind of need both to progress throughout the game. It's a little bit more comical, so it's not as serious as like a Beyond the Ice Palace 2 or The Last Faith. So it's kind of like a little bit of a break from that whole dark type of theme. Part two, from what I understand, isn't as good as part one. Part one was decent. I thought the platforming and level design in part one was good. It was simple. It was basic. It wasn't as complex as something that you would see in like a Super Metroid. The map layout wasn't as sprawling. But I think overall, I think this is a decent sequel that I'm looking forward to getting into once I get the opportunity to. But Galardians, again, is another one of those games that will play a lot like Castlevania. This next game is probably, of all the games, this one is probably the closest to Castlevania Symphony of the Night out of all the Switch games that I have here in this stack. I'm not saying it's the closest in general because there's a lot of Castlevania clones on the Switch and we're only touching on a few of them here today. But Time Spinner is very close to Symphony of the Night. Not just in the graphical art style, which is amazing, by the way, but it's really in the music, I think. I think the attention to detail that they put into the soundtrack for this game is pretty good. And the way they've kind of laid out the weapons design, the fact that you use these orbs as your main line of attack, and you can upgrade these orbs and apply different attributes to the orbs like fire and and blades and different things that strengthen the orb. You can also level the character up. I do like the fact that it's not as linear. It feels a little bit open because you can do side quests throughout this game. And then there's the time mechanic, right, where you can freeze time, and that just adds a whole new element to the game where you can freeze time to avoid attacks. You can freeze time to leverage enemies by jumping on them or even jumping on their projectile to get to different parts of the game. And I think Time Spinner does a really good job of taking everything that's good about Castlevania and trying to make it its own. Like I said, if you've played Castlevania Symphony of the Night and you play Time Spinner, you'll definitely understand what inspired this game. But I think it holds its own as a game on its own by having a more interesting story. I think it's easier to get really engrossed in this story. The dialogue in here is pretty decent. And I think this is one that you'll probably want to check out more than the others that I've shown here so far. So Time Spinner is definitely a Castlevania clone that I think you'll want to give a shot. Okay, next up, we've got these last two, which I think are the best, in my opinion. Blasphemous and Blasphemous 2 are the best Metroidvanias that you can check out on the Nintendo Switch. If you're a fan of the Castlevania series and you like the gameplay style, but you want an absolutely different spin on the genre, you want a completely original story, you want completely different gameplay mechanics, and just something that feels original but not, right? I think this is this is probably the best remix on the genre. For straight out the gate, the minute you put this game in your Switch, the story is gonna pull you in. Just explaining the penitent one, explaining the miracle, the the way they liken everything about this game to, religious references, whether it be in scripture. The imagery in this game is very grotesque, so this is not something that I would play around a child, but I think that adds to the lore and to the intrigue of this game. You'll see a lot of very disturbing images in this game, but I think that the gameplay is really what's going to draw you in here. And I think the vastness of the level design is crazy. It's crazy how open this game is and how wide this map is. So much, and I mean, obviously, there's been a number of Metroidvanias where you have to warp to different parts of the game, but there's so many ways that you can get to the same place in this game, whether you warp there, whether you take like what's the deal, like when you're going skiing, like a ski lift. They have like one part of the game where you almost have to take what feels like a ski lift to another part of the game. I think the animations in this game are extremely well done. There is like a finishing attack that you can perform on almost every enemy in this game that's unique to that enemy. And I think they really do a good job of mixing up the enemies. On top of that, this game is challenging. It's pretty challenging. I wouldn't say that it's 90s level challenging, but compared to a lot of the more modern Metroidvania style games that we see today, Blasphemous is probably the closest thing that you would have seen to like a 90s Metroidvania style game in terms of difficulty. I would say that Blasphemous is more difficult than Super Metroid to a degree. But the good thing about Blasphemous is that throughout the game, you are given the tools necessary to progress throughout the game, not just in terms of leveling up your magic abilities and your vitality, but also with tools that allow you to unlock, certain aspects of the main character, unlock certain parts of the level. It's just a very well done and in-depth game. And this, in my opinion, will probably be the best Metroidvania Castlevania clone on the Nintendo Switch, one that I cannot recommend enough. Again, it's probably not as family friendly as some of these other games, but typically Castlevania games aren't, or Castlevania clones are not going to be family friendly. Most of them are going to be either rated teen or mature. Usually they're going to have more of that mature feel to them. Same thing with Symphony of the Night. It was rated teen as well. So it's not like you're going to be playing any of these games with, your 4-year-old on your lap. But Blasphemous is probably one of those games that you'll want to wait for everyone to go to bed to actually play. Now, before I let you go, there are some honorable mentions that I do need to kind of let you guys know about. Games that I used to have in my collection that I don't have anymore, starting with Death's Gambit. I think Death's Gambit is another decent Metroidvania that you'll want to check out. After Image is another decent Castlevania clone that you'll want to check out. There's another Castlevania clone that reminds me of Galardians, but is not as good, and that's Scarlet Symphony. That's another Castlevania clone that you may want to check out, along with a better game in Eldorand. That's another one that you may want to check out as well. And honestly, the list goes on. I could probably rattle off 20 Castlevania games or Castlevania-like games that came out on the Switch, but that's the beautiful part about the Switch. The library is so sprawling and vast that there is just a long list of games that you can find for any genre that you're into, whether it be Metroidvania style games, shoot 'em ups, run and gun games, simulation games. The Switch library feels endless, but I did get a request from someone who asked me to talk about Castlevania clones on the Switch, and there are a number of them. Some of these are sealed because I do have them on the PlayStation 4, and I've played a lot of these on the PlayStation 4 just because it's easier for me to play Metroidvania style games on the PlayStation 4 controller than the Switch. That's just me personally, my personal preference. Either that or I downloaded the game as well. But check any of these games out. Some of them are cheaper than others. Blasphemous 1, the physical version, is ridiculously expensive. It's probably the most expensive game in this list, along with Time Spinner. But oddly enough, Blasphemous 2 is kind of cheap. This is still like a $30 to $35 game, unless it's gone up. I don't know. But Blasphemous 2 plays almost identical to Blasphemous 1, just with, in my opinion, different weapons, kind of better weapons, and just a progressed story. So you've got that there. And then these three, The Last Faith, Galardians, and Beyond the Ice Palace, these are all fairly cheap. I would say Beyond the Ice Palace is probably the cheapest. You could pick this up on Amazon. The Last Faith and Galardians are probably somewhat similar. Last Faith is probably in the 30s somewhere. Same thing with Galardians. This is the newest release of these games that you see here. Let me know if you've played any of these games, including Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and let me know which one is your favorite. That does it for me. It's the Y2K Collector. I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.